Breaking update. I wanted to give you information on Air India 315, a Boeing 787, the exact same type that was involved in the massive air disaster 4 days ago. I wanted to basically reassure you about flying, and we'll dive into some concerns as well. So I want to do both of those things. Let's start with the radio call from the Air India 315 crew that did the early return to Hong Kong.
For technical reasons, sir, we'd like to stay closer to Hong Kong. Maybe we will come back and land back into Hong Kong once we sort out the problem. We don't want to continue further.
And yes, your permission. Maintain present level. Advise when able for right turn to Hong Kong.
Able right turn right now in the 315.
So the pilots there talk about a technical issue that they're trying to solve, a problem that they're trying to solve. So we're going to get into in-flight emergencies versus early returns and potentially what these pilots were trying to solve. And it is weird, just 4 days after Air India Flight 171, one of the worst air disasters ever, crashed, a Boeing 787, the exact same type plane, and now we have an early return of a Boeing 787. So we're going to dive into what the reasons could be, potentially what they're going to discover in this inspection, because they inspected the entire fleet of Air India's 24 Boeing 787s after the massive air disaster of Air India 171. And now they're saying they're diving deep into this Boeing 787 as well. So let's talk about what happened in the air and what we might find. Oh, and then guys, please excuse me if the editing on this one isn't as sharp as other videos. I just wanted to get this out to you as fast as possible. So here's the rundown, guys. Air India Flight 315, a Boeing 787-8, was bound for New Delhi, 2,360 miles. They were going to cruise at roughly 500 knots. It took off from Hong Kong International Airport on June 16th, climbing out at roughly 180 to 200 knots. But then 15 minutes later, one of the pilots radioed air traffic control, as you just heard, a calm but telling message. For technical reasons, sir, we would like to stay closer to Hong Kong. So they're thinking, we're probably going to go back to Hong Kong, but we're going to go somewhere close. Maybe we will come back and land back into Hong Kong once we sort out the problem. So they're still deciding what their divert's going to be, but they're calm, cool, and collected at this point, which makes me think early return. They ended up making a turn back towards Hong Kong and landed safely just a few minutes later. No injuries, no disruption to Hong Kong's airport ops, but the plane's now under a rigorous inspection. So they're back to inspecting 787s just days after inspecting the entire fleet. So if you've watched my Air India 171 breakdowns, I've got 3 videos so far on that. I'll link to those down in the description, but this is a red flag when it comes to timing. Hong Kong's aviation authority is demanding a report, as they should. And with India ordering that inspection just days before, it just seems strange that there's an early return. I've never had an early return. Now that I've said it, I probably will, but I've never had an early return in an airliner, and it's very rare for it to happen. So for it to happen to 2 Boeing 787s, for a massive in-flight emergency to happen to one, and then an early return, which is a essentially critical issue that you need to land. You can't fly the jet over the ocean. It's not as extreme as maybe as an engine loss or something like that, which might go more into the emergency category. This is an emergency return, so you don't have confidence in the airworthiness of this aircraft to continue. But let's clarify those terms. So an in-flight emergency is critical. So think engine fire or rapid depressurization or loss of your hydraulics. So you're not quite in Mayday territory, which means you're going down, you're imminently needing to land, but you're in a position where you need to land immediately. And then an in-flight issue, it causes an early return, like Air India 315. It's serious, but it's manageable. It's a system fault you don't want to ignore and fly 2,360 miles with. So that measured call suggests an issue to me. It's not panic, but with Air India 171 so fresh, I'm sure these pilots are feeling unsettled, definitely smart at this time. So let's get to what these issues could have been. I'm going to break down the potential for what caused this early return, and maybe if there's anything that we can learn from this that would apply to that massive air disaster of Air India 171. But the 787's a tech beast. This thing is essentially made of all carbon fiber. It cruises at 500 knots easily. It's light years ahead of the Boeing 737 that had a ton of issues. The Boeing 737 runs on archaic tech. Supposedly, they've solved a lot of that with the Boeing 787, and friends I know that fly it say that they love it. They call it a cream puff. I'm not sure if that's a compliment, but they definitely enjoy flying that thing. But here's 5 top in-flight issues that the Boeing 787 could experience, and these could have prompted Air India India's 315's early return. Keep in mind, there'll be a full investigation and a report given to the Airport Authority of Hong Kong. I'm just a pilot on YouTube, and I want to give you guys as much information as I possibly can. The first thing that I think of anytime I think of an early return or an aircraft issue in general is the most important thing, which is engine trouble or engine performance. So the 787's GEnx is a beast, but any engine can face technical issues. And that technical reasons call that the pilot gives, to me, that could suggest Air India 315's pilot saw some sort of issue or warning with the engine. And if that's the case, you definitely don't want to take that thing over the ocean. You can't be operating with just one engine that you have confidence in. Even if both seem to be operating well at the time, if there's some sort of a fault issue on one of the engines, you're potentially going to do an early return back into Hong Kong. Secondly, a flight control anomaly. So the 787's got a fly-by-wire system that's way smoother, way slicker than the 737's clunky cables. Whew, yeah, way better than that. But if a wing sensor or a tail sensor, hydraulic sensor, or something electronic related to the flight controls misbehaves, you're going to take that jet back in. You're not going to take it out over the ocean. Especially with Air India 171's recent takeoff issues, we don't know what that's related to, but at this time, you're going to be very cautious with anything involving thrust or flight controls. That would be weird and concerning at any point, but especially after something happening so soon after takeoff to Air India 171. You're really going to be honed and dialed in as a 787 pilot, and hopefully as all pilots, to any anomalies happening during takeoff, climb out, or initially getting up into cruise. You're going to have an abundance of caution, as everyone should. The third thing would be avionics or navigation systems faults. So the 787's got a beast of a brain, and that thing's responsible for navigation and autopilot, all the different things that keep the aircraft on course. So the in-flight management system, or the GPS, is highly important. So if that thing glitches, you don't want to be disoriented out over the ocean. So you're going to return to Hong Kong. At this point, you can probably still see all the lights. So yeah, let's just go back and let's make sure this thing is able to get us to where we need to go. And then the fourth thing would potentially be more serious, and that would be a pressurization or a bleed air system issue. The 787 keeps the cabin at a low, roughly 6,000 feet or so, and that's way better than most airliners do. That's why they say you feel better getting off a Boeing 787, because there's more moisture in the air. You've been flying at a lower altitude for that period of time. But if there's something wrong with the air system, that includes the bleed system, the pressurization, that's all tied to the engines. And if there's anything that's not performing well with that, the cabin altitude starts to creep up or whatever, you're going to early return. You're not going to mess with that. No masks dropped on the Air India 315, but they did only climb to 22,000 feet. They didn't go any higher than that. So did they stop their climb due to some pressurization issue? We don't know quite yet, but we'll find out soon. And then fifth would be some sort of just critical sensor or a warning message. There's all kinds of beeps and squeaks on these jets. They're essentially large flying computers. So if any type of system anomaly came up that made them feel uncomfortable to take that jet out over the ocean, they would do an early return. So again, you've seen my Air India 171 videos potentially. If not, I'll link to those in the description. But with that happening just recently, with an issue during takeoff or early climb phase, every Boeing 787 pilot is going to be honed in on anything that goes on. And Air India's got 27 planes. They've got 27 787s, and they said that they've done a massive inspection on all of those. So again, they're going to do another inspection on this one. So we'll see what comes out of it. But if I was a betting man, I would say that it would probably be one of those 5 issues that caused an early return. And there's even more specialized criteria for ocean crossing airliners. So they're even more precise on what they'll allow the aircraft to continue with. So likely this was out of an abundance of caution, and hopefully it had nothing to do with maintenance or something like that. And hopefully this is just a coincidence that there's been issues with these Boeing 787s so close together. So what's your take on Air India 315 having this hiccup? So what do you guys think of the Air India 315 incident, this hiccup that caused the return to Hong Kong? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think it could be something systemic